Oh, yeah, that works. Good evening. I will try not to cough on the microphone too much tonight. We'll get through this. Before we get started, I do want to talk about, I want to thank Robert Holland. I see he's not here tonight. I hope teaching my lesson did not make him sick. But I want to thank Robert Holland. He literally had about 24 hours notice last Wednesday that I was not going to make it because about Wednesday afternoon, something hit me like a ton of bricks. And it was about Wednesday afternoon, about 3 o'clock before I got out of bed again. And I couldn't help Robert with anything, but he did an admirable job, I think, from what I understand. And it's good because Robert and I had some discussions about some of these concepts that we've been talking about. And so he was probably about as close to anybody I could think of to help out with me. And I appreciate you guys being patient with me. And I certainly appreciate Robert for his help last Wednesday, and filling in for me on extremely short notice and extremely short preparation. So thank you, Robert. So that being said, what did y'all talk about last week? God. All right, we got to start. Did Robert ask you kind of what you thought, what in your mind's eye, if you had a picture of God, what did that look like? Did he ask about that? Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Okay. Okay, and that's what you have in your mind's eye. When I say God, that's the image that appears to you. Somebody else? On the Sistine Chapel, right? With the finger? Yeah. Yeah. The white beard. Does it have a white beard, the Sistine? I get to see the Sistine Chapel this summer. Yeah, so we'll see. I'll check if it has a beard. And if it doesn't, I'll put one on it, I guess. So what else? Robert, you missed the great, I was apologizing for dumping this all on you last Wednesday night, and I appreciate you greatly for filling in short notice and short preparation. Thank you. We're just kind of catching up because tonight's topic folds into last week's topic, and I appreciate you covering it. What else? Sistine Chapel. What else? Shirley? An old man. It is. We've talked about it in the past, but it's kind of the white beard thing. You got the white beard and maybe balding a little bit. You think that's kind of the. Oh yeah, looks intelligence, right? Absolutely. That's not the look I'm rocking, but that's kind of our concept of God. And why do you think that is? Do you think that's what God looks like? No? I mean, I like your definition a little better, kind of that just all power. Because what does the Bible say about God? God is spirit. God is spirit. Do you ever think in terms of, I know we use this a lot, we were created in God's image, right? You think that's why we have the whole beard thing, older thing, et cetera, et cetera?
That very point last week with Robert here about the fact that one of the comment I made was the reason we all think like that is because the Bible says we was made in his image.
That's right.
He tried to make it physical instead of just spiritual.
Instead of spiritual. That's exactly right. And so we inadvertently, I think, limit God by giving him physical attributes. Had I been teaching the class, I don't know if Robert got into this or not, but what did the Romans and Greeks do as far as God? What were their thoughts? Anybody a scholar of Greek mythology here? William, you got to smile. I know you're looking to say something.
They made him human relatable.
They made him human relatable with human traits, you know? So, you know, they had gods that had affairs. They had gods that had certain weaknesses and certain strengths. And, you know, that's what humans do. We take God, finite being, and we try to relate him to God, an infinite being, and we try to relate him to our finite world and finite understanding. Mary? It was, and then later on you had Elijah that heard him in the still small voice and the wind and all of that. That's right. And according to the Bible, has any man seen God? No. No man has seen God. And which is, you know, if you think about it, we try to relate him to our physical attributes. So it's amazing that there's so many pictures of God out there, right? No man has seen God. What if I was saying God was created in our image? And again, you may have talked about this a little bit last week, but so what does that, to you, if it's not physical attributes, what does that mean? Spiritual. In what way? You knew there was going to be a follow-up question when you said that.
It's funny, I brought this up to Robert right at the end. So in Matthew Henry's commentary, that's what he goes down and talking, you know, I was just looking for that reference back in Genesis, where it says, let us create man in our image. It's not necessarily our image, our physical image, but our...
God doesn't look like me.
Right, because when you die, your spirit still lives.
Right.
Right, so that's...
So it's the soul, the aspects of the soul. Or if you think about it too, what's some of the other aspects? Maybe free will? You know, what other species technically, I guess, has free will? We have the opportunity to, make decisions for ourselves regarding our spiritual well-being, eternity, how we interact with others, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's part of it. Shirley?
The image is like God is a spirit of the soul. There's no color, race, anything attached to that. We all, when we are in heaven in our soul, you won't see color.
That's right.
Or anything.
That's right. And there is none. And I think we get caught up in these mortal bodies, and we start relating things to these mortal bodies, when in reality it's God's spirit that, that was the likeness we were created in, the spirit.
How is God's spirit in me and you and Robert and everybody else in here? I mean, really, that's out of the box when you really think about
That's right.
That, but how is he able to do that?
Did you talk about the omnipresence of God last week?
Did we, Robert? I don't remember we
Mentioned it. So what is omnipresence? God is everywhere. Is that one of the things that we understand? Understand how that happens? No. And I think it's interesting you bring that up, because that, I think, is one of the things that we tend to miss the boat on. Omnipresence becomes very difficult to understand when we limit God in size and space. So in other words, if God is roughly the size of a human, or maybe he looks like a human and he's bigger. But then what we end up doing is saying, well, God has to be over here, or God has to be over here, or God has to be over here, when in reality, God is everywhere. And the way I think of it in terms of, he created the universe, right? And we think, well, is he over here at this planet or over here at this star? Think in terms of he's over all of it. That he's all encompassing. Does that help a little bit as far as, That was kind of the thing that dawned on me. I do the same thing, Joe. It's kind of like God's omnipresent. Well, how does he make it to all those places? Kind of like Santa Claus delivering on Christmas Eve. How does he make it to all those places? He's already in all those places.
Led a discussion, and I don't know who brought it up, though, that I thought was very, very important, how if we're not careful, because that we diminish God on there. That, Robert, you remember the comments that they made about that? It's pretty extensive, a lot of different people making that comment. It was Harry, okay, brought it up, that we begin to equate ourselves to there and make it, I think he said make little gods, didn't he? That what he
That's exactly right. I mean, we end up doing just like the Romans and Greeks in Greek mythology is, our gods start to take on the form of humans. Our gods now look like, this guy who has incredible speed, or this guy who's the sun god, or it takes on those type of human characteristics because that's what we understand, because our minds are finite. Yes, sir.
I think the bigger thing for myself is I get a better understanding. It's my conscience. Like, that isn't mine. That's what God is giving me. And that makes me reconcile.
And that's and from that standpoint, that's that free will and that right from wrong scenario that comes into play that we don't get with everywhere else.
I know I might go out and do this wrong, but the conscience, like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have that if God didn't give that.
Like Paul said, I do what I don't want to do. Yeah.
And then to think about it later.
Yeah. Jerry?
I was thinking about, it says if you just tree of life, you'll become like me, knowing right from wrong. And sometimes I think we're born with something in us that teaches a little bit about what's right and what's wrong.
Okay, you're about to get into our discussion of sin, which is 2 weeks from now. In fact, this is kind of funny. I have this on my calendar at home. So for tonight's lesson, I have love marked on the calendar. PJ starts giving me these funny looks. Next weekend, I have sin. Wait till she starts giving me those looks. William?
Yeah, we've talked about God's omnipresence. We have to understand that God is not bound by time. And when we think about that, we work in time. God works outside of that. So we try to put him in that time and space how he
That's exactly right.
He's everywhere at the same time. So
It's the time and space. And again, it is our finite understanding of those parameters that God doesn't even recognize. Time, based on on the way we even count time is a completely human concept, right? We didn't really mark time until it's the sun and the moon and and the earth and how they revolve around each other and all of that. That's what time is. Yes.
Did a lot of digesting of last week's discussions.
You were forced to.
No, this was after the fact.
Oh, okay.
I was winging it last week. Actually thought about it now. But I came back to, and Todd referenced this, and it was actually outside the class time that this occurred. But, Todd and I were talking about this idea of free will, and yes, we have free will, but being created in the image of God, as we discussed here, or from a spirit standpoint, certainly not physical, from a spiritual standpoint, then that means God himself has free will. And then as you then transition that into love, for example, that makes me think our free will in choosing to love or not love, God's free will, God demonstrated his free will through love in that he sent Christ, right? It was a decision that God made. It was intentional. Our choosing to not sin is intentional. And it gets back to this idea of free will. And as a spiritual being, then we are created in the image of God in that we have free will. And what we choose to do with that, then it is either to our benefit or to our detriment.
That makes for a good segue because tonight's lesson is love. You mentioned that. So,
It's on the screen.
oh, yeah, I'm sure that was it. Yeah. But
But yeah, I hadn't thought about how important the notion of free will is when you talk about God and when you talk about us being in the image of God and our own free will.
Let me ask you this, because it falls right in line to that discussion. Can you love if you don't have free will?
Well, that's the point. If God created us as robots and programmed us to love him, then the love would be worthless.
It's no love. It's not love, right?
That's exactly the point.
Because, and we'll get in, again, this goes back to sin, but what ultimately, well, we're going to talk about love tonight. So we will not get into the definition of love just yet, but we will talk about love tonight.
Mark, one of the things about that, I think is important, that as a human on there, Christ done something that I think is amazing. We know that Paul said that after a period of time, the people were still on milk and not on the other food. We mature. I know, I can think about myself when I was 25, 26 years old, about that. What kind of a Christian was I versus maybe where we are today, even though I tried just as hard then.
Yep.
But I made a lot more mistakes, I think, and I think that's part of this whole free will thing.
And I think our discussion of love will follow that exactly. You'll see what I'm talking about in a minute.
Maybe let's think about something maybe I just came to mind. I've heard it before, but just a thought. When we think about God saying, when he said, let us make man in our own image. It's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit creating us. When you think about us as human beings, we're a threefold spiritual being. We have mind, body, and spirit. Mm-hmm. So that could also be a concept of God.
It is. A triune concept, even for humanity. Yep. All right, well, we're going to move on a little bit. I don't know if you'll be able to read these or not. Oh, wait, I guess I better turn on the clicker. Can you see that? No. I gathered a couple of love letters I wanted to share with you. Yeah, from my generation. I'm gonna share with you my first love here in a little bit. Well, PJ doesn't know it, but she's not here. Don't tell her. Do you like me? Yes or no? Do you remember the yes or no boxes? How many of you did yes or no boxes? Oh yeah, we all did. Absolutely, got to have yes or no boxes. And then apparently whoever was responding came back and said, I don't know, I don't even know myself yet, plus I'm under a lot of stress at home, I can't tell. P.S. You don't know yourself until you're 18. I've got news for them. I don't think you know at 18 either. But the reason, and we're going to go to a couple more, but the reason I pull this up is because at that age, and we're probably talking, first through third grade somewhere in some of these, how much did you understand love at that point in time? I mean, we had the check boxes down. But how much did you understand love as a grade schooler? You understood that your mama loved you. That's right. Except when she punished you. At that point, you weren't real sure. Oh, okay. Well, good. My mom did not cry when she punished me. There was a certain enjoyment there that I still don't understand. How much did you understand love at that point in time? Limited. Why was our knowledge of love limited? Because our experience was limited. We had, at that point in time, somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 10 years on this earth, right? So our understanding of love was whatever we got from our parents, whatever we learned in Bible school, which was not experiential love, it was educational love, let's put it that way. Those were the things that was what we knew about love. Those of you who have been married more than 50 years, you have a better understanding of love now? I haven't been married 50 years yet, but I think I do. PJ might disagree, but I think I do. And why is that? Keith just kind of talked about it. Why is that we have a better understanding of love now? We have experience. We understand kind of the give and take of love overall, or at least to some degree. I'm not going to say we understand it fully, but we understand it more. Love, how has your love changed from when you were 8 years old to where you are today? More mature, maybe? 58 years. Roy, do you do the check boxes? Never did the check box.
And I can say, yes, I loved him then. But through the years, you experience different things that the love builds on. Sometimes it's a negative in your bank account, your love account. Sometimes it's a positive. But when you love God and you experience more of life, you understand more what it means to love someone.
There are two things that you learn when you love God and you're married. One, God is perfect and God loves you. Two, your spouse is not perfect, but he loves you too. Well, none of us are. None of us are. And we don't experience love perfectly like God does. We experience love based on our finite experience and understanding. God, being an infinite being, has untold centuries and millennia to have adapted love or developed love or have experience around love that we will have never, the only time we will be able to understand the concept of God's love is when we make it to heaven. We will not be able to understand that here on earth. Yes?
I was just going to say, I think the love changes too from like phileo love,
We're going to get into all of those.
To agape love.
Yeah.
It's a choice.
And it's not, I'm going to say, there's actually 8 Greek types of love. We're going to go all over all 4 of them, but there's actually 8. And it's never necessarily just one. It's probably a combination of all of them or different parts of them or things along those lines. That's correct. And that's God's love. And that's typically the love that God has for us. And I don't know that we completely fully understand how deep that love is. We understand love differently than God does. Shirley?
I grew up being taught about God and loving God. And I knew my parents and my grandparents loved me. But understanding how much God loves me has changed through the years because of things that have happened in my life, and God's got me through that. A lot of things were a lesson, but my love for God has only grown stronger.
I would venture, and I think back on my own experience, I would venture there was a similar learning process in how your parents loved you, or understanding how your parents loved you. Because, as we get older and we become parents, then we really understand that sort of thing, right? So, Jamie?
So, listening to everybody, it's just like maybe you're good at a subject in school. Maybe you're a math whiz. I was not in any stretch. And you go on to become, a PhD mathematician or a nuclear physicist or something like that. And you become much more aware of the field, right? And you understand the nuances in ways that you wouldn't have, even though you were good at it, even though you were really interested in it, you hadn't been exposed to this angle or that perspective yet, right? So as you work with the topic, as you have it experienced, you become an expert in it, right? At some level. So it's like that with our understanding of love. As you move through life, you have different, it's presented to you in different ways, you know. Like Hampton said, he had a one-way down from his mother, and he understood that, and then later maybe there was a puppy or something, right? And so you grow through handling situations, right?
All right, you mentioned the puppy. I've had this Donny Osmond song going in my head for the last hour. Puppy Love, you guys remember that? 1972. I'm not going to sing it, don't worry. Jack?
And Jesus, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down right hand. And we in our own life, as we grow, I do a lot of things for people, but I do it out of joy. I don't have to do it. But I do it out of joy because I feel like I'm emulating God was planning to do. The widows in my neighborhood, which are about 63% of homes, have widows. And I have each one a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And like I do all kinds of things, but I don't do it. I do it out of joy.
Yep.
And I think that's what we learn as we go along, that person might sacrifice. When I remember what Gail went through and passing away and everything, and she finally said, "You're so sweet." I wasn't always conscious of how much I loved her until I was going to lose her.
Yeah.
And but so you do everything you can to keep them alive and well and taken care of. And we do that with our children. We do that with church members. Sometimes it means telling the truth out of love, and that happens as well. But I think it all comes from emulating what God is trying to make us be like Him. He wants us to assimilate all of His attributes, even though He made us now in His image, intellect, conscience, will, and emotions. We go haywire with those a lot of times, but as Christians we learn to do much more in that avenue of what God calls us.
And this goes back to what, so this was kind of my opening verse to begin with. Beloved, let us love one another, for God is of love. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. He who does not love does not know God, for God is love. We tend to think of love as an attribute of God. It is God. What are the two greatest commandments? Do what? Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. The two greatest commandments. Is it any wonder that a God who is love, the greatest commandments that He gives to mankind are love? Love God, your Creator. Love your fellow man. And again, we apply those two concepts, tend to be almost selectively in some cases. And God didn't mean for us to apply them selectively.
The commandment is probably the hardest one that we have as a human being. How do we truly love that other person?
But you know what, Joe? And the Bible says it. If you can't do the second one, don't even bother with the first. If you can't do the second one, don't bother with the first. We can say we love God all day long, but if we can't love our fellow man, you can't do them mutually exclusively.
That's probably the hardest one we face.
It is, yeah, absolutely. Especially when people do us wrong, right? Oh man, revenge.
The caveat there is not just to love your neighbor, but love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Exactly.
And if we were to live our lives like that, things that we desire in life, we should desire our neighbor to have.
Yep.
So that would really embolden us to do more for our neighbor. And that's what God intends for us when we make it to heaven. We will receive all that He has.
You guys remember the old joy bracelets? I didn't ever have a joy bracelet. Jesus first, others, yourself last, right? Jesus first, others, yourself last. As we get into our discussion of sin, we're going to talk about the concept of sin, and I'll just kind of give you a preview. As we talk about sin, my preview of sin, we think of it in a transactional sense. My definition of sin is when you get out a sequence of that J-O-Y. When you put yourself either first or you put anything above God, that's sin. And all the transactional stuff in the world doesn't make a difference if you've got that equation out of whack. But we'll get into sin later. We're talking about love right now. Good discussion. I think I'm going to have to be talking about love next week too. All right, we're going to go. We got a couple more because I love the last one. Happy Valentine's Day, or Happy Valentine's. I hope you have a great day, and I like you too. And by like, do you mean love? If you do, me too. But we can't be, here's the important stuff. We can't be boyfriend and girlfriend, my mom won't let me. But we can like and be friend and play together. P.S. This is not my best writing. I think there's something about children's concept of love that is, I think there's a reason that God said suffer, or that Jesus said suffer the little children to come unto me. Because there is something so innocent about a child's concept of love. And I think when he says, unless you become like one of these, that's one of the things he's talking about. That concept of love between us and our Maker is a recognition that we don't know it all, that our experience is limited, and that ultimately we just have to turn it over to Him. All right, I got one more letter. I think this guy has his priorities straight. But are you ready to be there when I'm mad or need to cry and I cannot do things that I can't do without anyone else but you? Yes, I am ready unless I am eating fried chicken. So chicken is more important than me, only fried chicken, and only when I'm hungry. But if not, then you are the only thing I care about. Oh, I can see his point. I love fried chicken too. Do I?
It's just like adults. So I love a person as long as it doesn't interfere with what I'm doing.
As long as they are happy with being second fiddle, right? To myself. Unfortunately, I think that's the majority of the world's concept of love. I don't know. You guys tell me. What do you think? What is your chicken? What is your fried chicken? It's interesting. I think more often than not, it's ourselves. It's the things that we want to do come first. And so we put ourselves first. Mary?
Thinking about love your neighbor as yourself, there's also an issue in the world of people. Everyone doesn't love themselves.
That's true.
And hurt people hurt other people.
That's true.
And so when we get that straight, then we can love our neighbor and love God. But we really need to know how to have healthy self-esteem and love ourselves and seek from heaven's way.
And I mentioned earlier regarding the 8 different types of love, and one of them is self-love. Philatia, philosia, is it's like you said, it's the self-esteem. It's the, loving myself as for who I am and those types of things. So it's a self-love. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. Other thoughts you have? Yes, sir, Rodney?
Well, using the food analogy, you like chicken more than me.
Only if it's fried.
But we feed on love.
We do.
And when we talked about maturity earlier, as we feed, we grow and we mature.
You think it's any wonder that when we talk about the fact that we feed on love, you think it's any wonder that we're commanded to come together as Christians, as a church? Why is that? For love and good works? We talk about having our batteries recharged.
Well, that's where you talk about love. You talk about God.
That's right.
That's the unity we have when we gather in this place, a room full of love.
That's exactly right. And that's the point. That's why I don't understand why Wednesday nights we have, versus Sunday mornings.
1 John 4:16 says that God is love. You have to abide in love. Being here all the time. What better way to see the love and abide in love is being with other Christians?
Yeah, in ancient Rome in the first century, they were being persecuted, and the accusation against them is that they were having love feast, and so there were being rumors spread against them about their love feast. But that was how important it was for them to come together. They were being persecuted just for coming together, and yet it was important that they be together.
Mark, this kind of ties into an old question that's come up many times about that, why somebody they're not here on Sunday morning. Isn't it funny, the Bible only tells us at one time that we need to meet together and remember Him? Mm-hmm. It's only one time, Sunday.
We're only required
That's what I said.
the one time. That's right.
But the other side that we have to think about, and I thought about this a lot, particularly as I was raising my kids, and I about that. What is the situation in our mind of maturity of level, what to do? Because there's times that I think God to understand if somebody done something with their kids that was to help them to mature more. They maybe miss on Wednesday night. Now,
Sure.
But I also believe very deeply that we attend every service that the elders have set up for us to attend, to learn more and all, and we should have that wish to do that and to have the fellowship together, plus have the spiritual bread that we need just to live the day by day. So, that's the key, but God's wisdom said, hey, this love that you're talking about has got to come together and have that happen.
Let me back up to something you said early on, because I think you hit the nail on the head. We are required. And when it becomes a matter of doing it because we're required, we've already missed the boat. So, anyway, all right. Yes, Christy.
2 points. So I think about how the world focuses on conditional love, and God teaches us, and when we're here, it feels like we're enveloped with unconditional love, so it's a great feeling. And I had a friend one time who told me, if you can't give God 4 hours of your life, then you have a heart issue.
Oh, yeah.
And that friend was Beth Grant. And I'll never forget that. Because I was an immature Christian when she told me that.
And that's what I go back to. If it's a matter of a requirement that you're here because you're required to be here, there's really no reason for you to be here.
I think the reason God wants us to be together, one thing I brought up in ladies' class years ago, we need to know each other. We can't know each other unless we get together, love each other. And I told them, we're gonna be together a long time.
Don't say it like that, a long time.
Eternity.
That's right.
We're gonna be together. So why don't we wanna spend time together? If we think that's gonna be a burden,
That's
there
true.
is something wrong.
Well, and that's when, again, we are putting our wants and needs ahead of God. And again, to me, that's the very definition of sin. Once you've put your wants and needs ahead of God, or even ahead of somebody else, that's my definition of sin. And we're actually going to talk about sin as a concept in a week or two, because it looks like we'll be talking about love next week.
Love takes time to grow.
Absolutely.
Think back when you're dating your spouse. You want to spend a great deal of time with that person, he, she. And, you know, you make the investment. And that's the way it is being a Christian. If you want to grow your love to God, you want to be with God, you want to be with fellow Christians. I remember taking a class, a marriage class. One of the points the author made, the book we were using, for a marriage, divorce is so high because people aren't willing to put the time in to allow love to grow. The author says 15 years is the minimum that's needed. And I think that's why we lose so many new Christians, is because they're not putting the time to grow the love for the Lord.
Well, and I look back on, probably all of you went through this as young marrieds. There were some challenges. I mean, it's almost, I tell you, you think having to adjust to a new roommate in college is difficult. Man, having to adjust to a new roommate for life is doubly difficult. But to your point, there is a long-term objective there that so many people miss out on the long-term aspects of it. They think, I guess the prevailing notion, in fact, there's a billboard out here on I-77. Have you guys seen this? Life is short, get a divorce. If that's the way you approach marriage, it's not going to last long.
There's a new one right before that now that says, try to work it out, but if you can't, call blah, blah, blah.
See, there was never that option. There was never that option. You will work it out. That was never an option. All right, I told you I'd tell you about my first love. We have not even gotten on topic yet. So we'll talk about love next week, but I told you I'd tell you about my first love. PJ doesn't know about this. Don't tell her. She was beautiful. She was the love of my life. Dark hair, dark eyes. We were an item for, a couple of years. I don't really know why it ended, probably the age difference. I was in second grade, she was in first. Her name was Frankie Higgins. Thank you, you're dismissed.